Ladies and gentlemen, how are you today? In the face of rudeness, our natural instinct is often emotional. Maybe it's a rush of anger, a sharp retort, or even a desire to match their energy with something equally cutting. But here's where true strength shows in your ability to remain calm. Calmness isn't weakness, it's control. When someone disrespects you, what they're often looking for is a reaction, not a resolution. By staying calm, you instantly take away their power. You send a silent but strong message. You don't get to decide how I respond. That's your first win. It's important to understand that calmness doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean you allow someone to walk all over you or say nothing when you're clearly being disrespected. Staying calm is about choosing how you speak, not if you speak. It's about letting your words land with impact, not just noise. Silence, when used with intention, can say more than 1,000 angry words. But a well-placed, calm sentence delivered with poise can shift the energy of the entire moment. When you respond calmly, you control the narrative. Most rude people expect to provoke chaos. They want an argument, a fight, a scene. Your calmness throws them off balance. It forces them to deal with their own behavior instead of focusing on your reaction. There's discomfort in being met with grace when all they gave was disrespect. That's the moment they start questioning themselves. They didn't get what they expected, and that's powerful. Moreover, staying calm protects your image and your reputation. In social settings, workplaces, or public scenarios, people are always watching, especially when tension arises. When you handle disrespect with grace and assertiveness, it builds respect from others, even those who aren't involved. You begin to stand out as someone composed under pressure, someone who doesn't let others shake their sense of self, and that reputation travels far. In today's world where confrontation is glorified and viral moments are made out of loud exchanges, calmness is a rare art, but it's the quiet people who often say the most with the least. When you speak with calm, you speak with clarity. Your message isn't lost in shouting or insults. It hits precisely where it needs to. You're not trying to out-argue the other person. You're showing that you don't need to argue at all to be right, to be firm, or to be heard. Practicing calm responses also gives you more peace. Rudeness can easily ruin your mood, your day, or even your confidence if you let it get under your skin. But when you learn to stay composed, you start building emotional resilience. That means fewer regrets about what you said in anger, fewer moments where you replay conversations in your head. You handled it. You were in control. That emotional discipline pays off over and over again. Finally, calmness opens the door for deeper conversations. When and if they're worth having. Some people are rude because they're hurting, insecure, or dealing with their own chaos. While that never justifies bad behavior, your calm response might be the mirror they've never had. It might make them pause. It might change how they approach the next person. And even if it doesn't, you've maintained your dignity, which is far more valuable than winning an argument. When confronted with rudeness, it's common to feel the immediate urge to react, often with a sharp or defensive response. The temptation to fire back can be overwhelming, especially when you feel insulted or belittled. However, this instinctive reaction can escape the situation rather than diffuse it. Reacting without thought tends to be an automatic response, driven by emotions, but it's in those moments that reflection becomes the most powerful tool. Taking a moment to pause and reflect before responding can prevent you from saying something you later regret and can help you maintain control of the situation. Reflecting allows you to detach yourself from the emotional charge of the moment. Instead of getting swept up in anger or hurt, you can process the situation more rationally. What did the person actually say? Why are they acting this way? Is this about you, or is their behavior a reflection of their own issues? These are the types of questions that allow you to distance yourself from the immediate emotional response and approach the situation with clarity. It's not about justifying their actions, but understanding the context in which they're behaving that allows you to respond in a way that maintains your dignity. By reflecting, you allow yourself to think through your options rather than reacting impulsively. Often, we respond quickly because we feel we need to protect ourselves or win the interaction. But in doing so, we miss the opportunity to take the higher ground. A quick, reactive response can lead to a back and forth argument where both parties dig their heels in and nothing gets resolved. When you take a step back and reflect, you open up space for a more thoughtful and strategic approach, one where you don't just engage for the sake of it, but where you choose the best course of action based on the situation. Reflection also helps you check your own feelings and motivations. Sometimes rudeness can bring out the worst in us, especially if we feel that our dignity or self-worth is being attacked. If we don't take a moment to reflect, we may unknowingly let someone else dictate our emotional state. But when you stop and consider your feelings, why does this upset me so much? Is this something I can let go of? You regain control over your emotions. It becomes less about defending yourself against an attack and more about protecting your peace. You realize that your emotional response is yours to manage, and you don't need to let someone else's bad behavior disrupt your inner calm. Another key benefit of reflection is that it allows you to identify the best way to respond, rather than just reacting to the situation. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. By reflecting, you might come to realize that engaging with a rude person isn't worth your time or energy. On the other hand, reflection might lead you to choose a measured, calm response that diffuses the situation rather than escalating it. Whether you choose to walk away or deliver a well-thought-out response, the reflection process ensures that you are acting from a place of intention, not emotion. Reflecting on the rudeness also gives you an opportunity to examine the person's behavior more objectively. Sometimes, the person being rude is dealing with their own frustrations, insecurities, or emotional turmoil. Their rudeness may have nothing to do with you and everything to do with what they're going through. By reflecting on their behavior, you can resist the urge to take their words personally and avoid internalizing their negativity. When you step back and view the situation through a lens of empathy, it becomes easier to let go of the need to retaliate or defend yourself. Finally, taking the time to reflect teaches you about your own boundaries and what you're willing to tolerate. When someone is rude, it's an opportunity to assess how much you're willing to let slide and what lines you're not willing to allow others to cross. By reflecting on how the situation makes you feel, you can decide whether it's worth addressing the disrespect or whether it's better to walk away. In doing so, you gain a deeper understanding of your own values and how you want to be treated. This level of self-awareness strengthens your ability to respond with confidence and clarity, rather than reacting out of hurt or impulse. When faced with rudeness, it's easy to slip into a defensive stance and counterattack. But a more powerful response is to simply put the mirror up to the other person. This means reflecting their behavior back to them without attacking or becoming aggressive. When someone disrespects you, the best way to handle it is not to engage in the same disrespect, but to hold a mirror up to their actions so they can see the impact of their words or behavior. Often people act out of impulse or frustration, and they don't fully realize how their actions affect others. By calmly reflecting their rudeness back to them, you make them confront the reality of their behavior, which can cause them to pause and rethink their approach. When you put the mirror up, you don't directly insult or belittle the person. Instead, you draw attention to their actions by describing how their behavior is inappropriate. For instance, you could say something like, "I'm not sure if you realize how your words are coming across, but that feels disrespect." This approach makes the other person aware of how they're behaving without you stooping to their level. It forces them to reflect on their conduct and gives them a moment of self-awareness they might not have had before. It's a subtle yet effective way of showing them that their actions are not acceptable without escalating the situation. This method can be particularly effective because it allows you to stand firm in your position without being confrontational. Rudeness often thrives in a chaotic, emotionally charged environment where both parties are shouting over each other. However, when you take a calm approach and simply reflect their behavior back to them, you're not adding to the tension. Instead, you are offering a moment of clarity, which can often be more unsettling for the rude person than an argument. They are suddenly forced to see themselves through your eyes, which can be an uncomfortable but necessary experience for them. Furthermore, by putting the mirror up, you maintain the moral high ground. Instead of falling into the trap of matching their negativity, you take a step back and force them to confront their own actions. You don't need to lower yourself to their level, and you certainly don't need to engage in an unnecessary battle of insults. You can simply say, "I would appreciate if you refrained from speaking to me like that." This not only makes you appear more composed, but it also communicates that you are someone who expects to be treated with dignity and respect, and you're not afraid to point out when that respect is being violated. Reflecting their behavior can also help to de-escalate a potentially volatile situation. When someone is rude, they might be looking for a fight or trying to provoke an emotional response. By simply showing them their own rudeness in a non-judgmental way, you take away their power to provoke. This may leave them speechless or at a loss for words, as it's much harder to continue being disrespectful when the other person isn't retaliating in kind. Instead of meeting their aggression with your own, you show them the futility of their actions, which can bring the conversation to a standstill, forcing them to reassess their behavior. Putting the mirror up also has the potential to make the rude person reflect on their own character. Sometimes people act rudely out of a place of insecurity, frustration, or even jealousy. By showing them that their behavior isn't going unnoticed, you subtly call attention to their insecurity or immaturity without accusing them directly. This reflection can trigger a moment of introspection. They may start questioning their actions and why they resorted to rudeness in the first place. In some cases, this can lead to an apology or a more considerate interaction in the future, although not always. At the very least, they may become more mindful of how they treat others going forward. Finally, putting the mirror up serves as a reminder that we are not responsible for the way others choose to behave. While you can't control how someone treats you, you can control how you respond, and by reflecting their behavior back to them, you reaffirm your own values and boundaries. You're not accepting their disrespect, nor are you condoning it. Instead, you are giving them a chance to reflect on their actions and how they might better interact with people in the future. This shift in dynamic makes it clear that respect is a two-way street and you won't settle for anything less. Maintaining the upper ground in any situation, especially when faced with rudeness or disrespect, requires not just patience, but a strong sense of self-discipline. The idea of upper ground isn't about superiority or trying to dominate another person. It's about keeping control of the situation and your own emotional response. When someone disrespects you, it's easy to get caught up in the moment and feel compelled to respond with anger or hurt. However, responding from a place of frustration only drags you into their level of negativity. By maintaining the upper ground, you stand above the fray, keeping your dignity intact while showing that you won't stoop to their level. One of the most powerful ways to maintain the upper ground is to choose not to engage in petty arguments. Often rude people try to provoke you because they want to get a reaction, whether it's to see you upset or to stir chaos. If you allow yourself to fall into their trap, you've already lost control of the situation. By refusing to engage in their rudeness, you assert your autonomy. You show that you are not driven by their actions or words, and you refuse to let them dictate your emotional state. It's important to realize that when you stay calm and choose not to retaliate, you are essentially giving them no ammunition to continue their behavior. Keeping the upper ground also means responding in a way that reflects your values and integrity. When faced with disrespect, it's tempting to want to lash out or retaliate. However, this often results in a vicious cycle of escalating hostility. If you respond with rudeness or anger, you become just as culpable as the person who started the conflict. By maintaining composure and responding with respect, you're setting the tone for the conversation. You're showing that your sense of self-worth isn't contingent on how others treat you, and you refuse to compromise on your principles. This is the ultimate form of self-respect, refusing to engage in behavior that goes against your core values, no matter how the other person behaves. Another important aspect of maintaining the upper ground is knowing when to walk away. Sometimes the best way to assert your strength and preserve your peace is to simply remove yourself from the situation. You don't need to fight every battle, especially when it's clear that the person being rude isn't interested in having a constructive conversation. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak or that you've let them win. On the contrary, it demonstrates that you are strong enough to recognize when an interaction is futile. You show that your time, energy, and peace of mind are too valuable to waste on someone who is determined to disrespect you. In doing so, you take back control over the situation and refuse to let negativity drag you down. Maintaining the upper ground also involves understanding the power of non-reactive communication. Words are powerful, but how you deliver them matters, just as much as what you say. When someone is rude to you, speaking with a calm, measured tone not only helps you keep control of the situation, but it also communicates that you are the one in charge of the interaction. For example, instead of raising your voice or matching their anger, you could simply say, "I don't think this conversation is going to be productive right now." This type of statement is firm, polite, and doesn't escalate the tension. You're not giving in to their rudeness, but you're also not getting caught up in the drama they're trying to create. Another benefit of maintaining the upper ground is that it allows you to hold on to your emotional power. When you react impulsively to someone's rudeness, you give them control over your emotions. You allow their negativity to dictate how you feel, and in doing so, you lose your sense of personal power. On the other hand, when you choose to remain calm and composed, you keep your emotions in check. You refuse to let anyone else have the power to disturb your inner peace. This is an incredibly empowering position to be in, as it allows you to respond from a place of clarity and self-assurance rather than frustration and knee-jerk reactions. Finally, maintaining the upper ground doesn't just affect the person who is being rude, it also influences how others perceive you. People around you are always watching how you handle conflict, especially when it involves disrespect or confrontation. By keeping your composure and maintaining a respectful tone, you gain the respect of others. They see you as someone who doesn't let their emotions take over and who handles difficult situations with grace. This not only boosts your personal reputation, but also elevates your influence in any situation. When you consistently maintain the upper ground, you position yourself as a role model for emotional intelligence and maturity, which earns you respect and admiration from those around you. When someone disrespects you, it's easy to immediately respond with an equally harsh or defensive reply. However, one of the most powerful responses you can have is to let the weight of their words land without reacting impulsively. Instead of retaliating or escalating the situation, give their words the space to be fully realized. By not immediately firing back, you allow the rudeness to settle, and this gives them a chance to reflect on their behavior. Sometimes people act out of frustration or even insecurity, and by not rushing into a response, you create a moment where they can start to understand the impact of their actions. The more you allow them to sit with their words, the more likely they are to feel the discomfort of realizing how inappropriate they've been. Letting their words sink in also puts the power back in your hands. When you remain calm and quiet, the other person is forced to acknowledge that their rudeness hasn't had the desired effect on you, Rude people often seek a reaction, whether it's a fight, an argument, or an emotional outburst. When they don't get this reaction, it's like pulling the rug out from under them. Their attempt to provoke you loses its power. They may feel uncomfortable or self-conscious about their behavior, especially if they were expecting you to retaliate in a way that would justify their actions. This pause in your reaction creates a shift in the dynamic, making them aware of how their behavior is being received. By giving their words the space to settle, you also protect your own emotional well-being. Responding in the heat of the moment can lead to regret, particularly when emotions are running high. Often, in those moments of anger or frustration, we say things we don't mean, which can worsen the situation. When you hold back your immediate reaction, you safeguard yourself from potentially saying something you might regret. The key to letting their words weigh on them is to refuse to mirror their rudeness, but instead maintain a level of detachment that protects you emotionally. You don't allow their negativity to influence your own state of mind, and by doing so, you remain composed, keeping your peace intact. Another important aspect of allowing their words to sink in is that it can serve as a silent form of accountability. Often, people are rude or disrespectful without realizing the full extent of their behavior. They may not understand the impact their words have on others until they are met with silence or a calm, collected response. By not immediately retaliating, you force them to think twice about the way they spoke to you. Their words may begin to echo in their mind, and they'll start to question their own conduct. This can lead to a moment of self-reflection where they realize that their disrespect was uncalled for. In this way, you don't need to call them out directly. They'll begin to feel the weight of their own words and be left to reconsider their actions. Letting the weight of their words fall on them also sends a clear message that you are not easily shaken. People who disrespect others often want to feel a sense of control over the situation. When they see that their words haven't had the desired effect on you, it disrupts their sense of power. You're not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you upset. And this can be disorienting for someone who is used to controlling conversations with rudeness. The more you allow them to sit with their words, the more they may realize that their behavior won't get the reaction they were hoping for, which could make them reconsider their approach in future interactions. In some cases, this kind of response can prompt an apology, especially if the rude person starts to realize how inappropriate their actions were. When someone is given a moment to reflect on their behavior, they may come to understand that their words were hurtful or unnecessary. If they are at all self-aware, they might feel compelled to offer an apology or at least adjust their tone in the future. This is an opportunity for them to take accountability for their actions and acknowledge the impact they have had on you. However, it's important to remember that their apology is not your main goal. Your primary focus is to protect your own dignity and peace, regardless of whether they apologize or not. Lastly, by letting their words weigh on them without immediate retaliation, you foster an environment of maturity and self-respect. You show that you don't need to respond to every negative comment or disrespectful remark. Instead, you choose to rise above it, maintaining your integrity and calmness. This sends a message not only to the person who was rude, but also to those around you. They see that you are a person who values themselves enough to not engage in petty arguments or retaliate against disrespect. This act of restraint communicates that you are not interested in drama or conflict. Rather, you are focused on maintaining a respectful, composed, and dignified demeanor no matter the situation. One of the most powerful tools at your disposal when faced with rudeness or disrespect is your ability to control your emotions. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to let your emotions dictate your actions, especially when someone's words or behavior strike a nerve. However, losing control of your emotions gives the other person exactly what they want: to see you react. Emotional reactions often cloud our judgment and make it harder to respond strategically. When you maintain emotional control, you show that you are unaffected by their attempts to provoke you, which not only protects your dignity, but also demonstrates that you're in command of your own reactions. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean suppressing them or pretending you're not upset. It means acknowledging your feelings and then choosing how to express them. When someone is rude or disrespectful, it's normal to feel anger, frustration, or even hurt. These feelings are valid and part of being human, but reacting impulsively based on these emotions often leads to regret. By pausing to process your feelings, you can better understand why the situation is bothering you and choose how to express your thoughts in a calm and measured way. This allows you to express yourself without letting your emotions control you, maintaining your sense of dignity throughout the interaction. Emotional control also protects your relationships with others. People around you are always observing how you handle conflict, especially in moments of tension or disrespect. If you lose your temper or lash out, others may view you as impulsive or immature. On the other hand, if you handle rudeness with composure and emotional intelligence, you earn respect from those around you. They see that you are someone who can maintain their cool in difficult situations, which boosts your reputation and strengthens your ability to navigate challenging social or professional dynamics. By controlling your emotions, you show others that you can rise above conflict, making you a role model for how to handle adversity gracefully. Another important aspect of emotional control is that it allows you to think clearly and strategically in the moment. When emotions are running high, it's easy to say something in anger that you might regret later. On the other hand, when you stay calm, you create space for more rational and thoughtful responses. For instance, if someone insults you, instead of immediately firing back with a similar insult, you can choose to respond with a statement that highlights their disrespect without escalating the situation. A calm, collected response not only helps you maintain control, but also forces the person who was rude to reflect on their behavior, especially if you don't match their emotional energy. By maintaining emotional control, you also gain a sense of personal empowerment. It's empowering to realize that your reactions are within your control and that you don't have to be a victim of someone else's rudeness. When you allow someone else to provoke you into anger or frustration, you are giving them power over your emotional state. But when you take control of your emotions, you become the one in charge. This shift in perspective allows you to approach difficult situations with a greater sense of agency and confidence. You don't feel helpless in the face of rudeness. You feel in control of how you engage with it, and that control is a form of personal strength. One of the greatest benefits of emotional control is that it helps you preserve your peace of mind. Rudeness can be frustrating and even upsetting, but when you let your emotions get the best of you, you allow that frustration to linger. A harsh word or disrespectful behavior can affect your mood, your day, and even your mental well-being if you don't manage how you react. However, by maintaining emotional control, you can process your feelings and move past the encounter more quickly. You don't allow someone's negativity to invade your peace, and you're able to return to your day with a sense of emotional equilibrium. You don't let the rudeness of others disrupt your inner calm. Lastly, controlling your emotions allows you to take a step back and assess the situation objectively. When you're not reacting impulsively, you can evaluate whether the confrontation is worth addressing at all. Sometimes a rude person may not be open to discussion, and engaging with them may only lead to further conflict. In those moments, emotional control lets you make the decision to walk away or disengage without feeling like you've lost something. You simply choose to preserve your emotional energy for situations that deserve it. This ability to step back and assess a situation without being swayed by emotion gives you clarity, which ultimately strengthens your decision-making process in every aspect of your life. Responding with dignity in the face of rudeness or disrespect, it means approaching the situation with grace, calmness, and a sense of inner strength, regardless of how the other person behaves. When someone is rude, it can be easy to want to defend yourself aggressively, but reacting in a dignified way not only preserves your sense of self-worth, but also demonstrates your ability to handle conflict without resorting to negativity. A dignified response shows that you understand your value and that you will not allow someone else's disrespect to diminish that. Responding with dignity starts with self-awareness. When you know your worth and believe in your own integrity, you are less likely to feel shaken by someone's rude behavior. You understand that their words or actions do not define you. Often people who are rude are projecting their own insecurities, and their behavior says more about them than it does about you. By recognizing this, you can approach the situation with the perspective that you are not at fault and that their behavior is a reflection of their own issues. This awareness empowers you to remain composed and respond with the dignity that reflects your true self. A dignified response also involves choosing your words carefully. When you respond with dignity, you are mindful of how your words may affect the situation. You do not need to meet rudeness with more rudeness. Instead, you can deliver a calm, assertive response that conveys your boundaries without escalating the tension. For example, rather than resorting to insults or defensive arguments, you might calmly say something like, "I don't appreciate being spoken to that way, and I'd like us to have a respectful conversation." This shows that you have set a clear boundary and you are not afraid to assert it in a respectful manner. One of the most effective ways to respond with dignity is through emotional restraint. Rude behavior is designed to provoke a reaction, often to make you feel small or inferior. By not reacting impulsively, you demonstrate that you are above the need to engage in petty exchanges. Emotional restraint requires a level of self-discipline and maturity that immediately shifts the dynamic in your favor. It tells the other person that you are not going to be dragged into an emotional battle, and this alone can often be disarming. When you control your emotions and remain calm, you show that their attempt to provoke you is not working, and this is often the most dignified way to respond. Maintaining dignity also involves taking the high road when possible. It's easy to fall into the trap of trying to win the argument, especially when someone is being rude or disrespectful. However, dignity is not about proving that you are right or making the other person look bad. It's about rising above the situation. By choosing not to engage in the same negative behavior, you separate yourself from the conflict and refuse to participate in the drama. You demonstrate that you are not interested in proving a point or escalating the situation. Instead, you focus on maintaining your own peace of mind and composure, and in doing so, you leave the other person with nothing to feed off of. Responding with dignity can also serve as an example to others. Whether in a social or professional setting, people are always watching how you handle difficult situations. When you respond with respect and poise, you set a standard for how to navigate challenging conversations. Others take note of your ability to maintain composure, and this often earns you their respect. More importantly, responding with dignity gives others a model to follow. They see that you do not need to lower yourself to the level of the rude person to be heard or respected. Your example encourages those around you to also respond with dignity when faced with similar situations. Another important aspect of responding with dignity is that it reinforces your boundary. By responding in a composed and respectful manner, you show that you have clear standards for how others should treat you. A dignified response isn't about being passive or allowing people to walk over you. It's about standing firm in your boundaries while maintaining your self-respect. For example, when someone is rude, you don't need to accept the behavior or tolerate. Instead, you assertively express that such behavior is unacceptable, but you do so in a way that maintains respect for both yourself and the other person. This approach makes it clear that while you respect yourself, you also expect others to respect you. Finally, responding with dignity helps you maintain your peace. When you engage in conflict or rudeness on the same level, It can be mentally exhausting. Arguing, shouting, or retaliating often drains your emotional energy and leaves you feeling unsettled. By responding with dignity, you avoid this emotional drain and preserve your peace of mind. You can move forward without holding on to the negative energy of the confrontation. This sense of peace is invaluable because it allows you to stay focused on what truly matters in your life without being bogged down by petty conflicts or the negativity of others.